Hey guys, it's me, Clash of Max, and welcome to the Eternal City Season 7. Here we are. It's been a long wait, and by a long wait I mean about, probably a day or so, because I spent so long and putting off uploading last season's finale. So yeah, I got that out of the way before I jumped onto this thing. And yeah, it's a new season. Last season we did very well. We went undefeated the whole season. That is quite an accomplishment of myself. I'm very proud. I'm very proud of that. It was a good season for me. It's a very bulky, almost like semi-stall sort of team. Something that I'm relatively comfortable with. Although, I wish I kind of would like to play more with more breakers and faster speed tiers. But that's something that we have introduced in this net new draft. So, spoiler alert, I'm an Aegislash now. Because I promoted regular season and won grand finals and brought Namdu with me. So, I think I eventually verse Namdu. I hope. We'll see. Anyhow, here we are. So, this season, a few things have changed in terms of drafting. There is now a new tier, a 19-point tier, where a lot of good stuff goes. So Mew and Urshifu moved from 18 points up to 19 because they're broken. And I think Dragapult got to 19 after being unbanned, and Landorus I regained Sheer Force and is now in 19 points. So a bunch of really strong stuff is in 19 points. And here's me in 16th pick, so I have to wait 16 for 16 players, all the way at the end until I get my first pick. So I was like, oh no, all my stuff's gonna be gone. And then, what do you know it? I have Will, so I can pick two Pokemon at once. And yeah, when it gets to me, what Pokemon is still waiting for me to be picked? A Mew. Mew made it 16 places somehow. I don't know how, but whatever draft plan I had got thrown out the window because here's a Mew presented to me on a golden platter. So spoiler alert, I got Mew. Also known as the OG, the original gangster, the first Pokemon, the ancestral Pokemon, whatever you want to call it. Mew is here. I don't know how it. I have no idea how it made it to me. This thing is pretty good. So if you're unfamiliar with how Mew works, as you can see, 100 stats on each stat. 600 total. Really balanced, really good. 100 speed's not bad. 100 defense on all the defenses and HP is super good. It's super bulky. It could play a similar role to Deoxys did last season, because Deoxys' defense has really high defense but bad HP. So it sort of evens it out a bit, similar to Mew. With Mew has pretty good defense, really good HP. So it bounces it out. So this thing can be bulky. But what else can Mew be? Mew can also be strong. It can also set up. It can get hazards up. It can do removal. And why does that matter, you ask? Well, Mew learns every move under the sun. Not every move under the sun. That's Smeagol's job, but most moves under the sun. So basically, the reason why Mew's in 19 points is because it can do whatever it wants. Basically, this thing has access to all the setup options. Basically, it's got, besides Quiver Dance, it's got Dragon Dance, so I can do a physical swooping set, or I could do Swords Dance alternatively. I could even go Nasty Plot or Calm Mind for special sides. I could even go for the disgusting Cosmic Power set. Cosmic Power, if you want to wear, boost both defense stats, and then Cosmic Power, Stored Power. People who play OU probably aware of it. I haven't played OU in a while, and I know that thing's been rampaging, and it doesn't sound too fun, so let's subject it to our opponents. Yeah. So basically how that works, boost both your defenses, stored power gets stronger for every stat boost, so you get bulkier and stronger at the same time, and he also has reliable recovery in Roost or Recover. I don't know if it gets Recover actually, I know it gets Roost and Soft Boiled, they do the same thing anyway, who cares. So yeah, so it can be a really good setup, Pokemon, or it could just use a Choice Band or a Choice Scarf, Choice Specs, because it has coverage for so many types. It's insane. Could even pivot out with U-turn, Flip Turn, Volt Switch. Has the pivot game, Down Pat. I want to do hazards. Cool. I can get Stealth Rocks, Spikes, or Toxic Spikes. If I want to defog for whatever reason, I have defog. Like, Mew can do a lot, and the problem that Mew has is that it can do too much sometimes, and it will get a bit overwhelming, which, you know, I was aware of before drafting Mew. So when I'm using Mew, I have to try and, you know, play it kind of simple so that my brain doesn't explode trying to figure out some insane set. But I might have a few insane sets here and there, but for the most part, it'll be probably simple. And the main thing of Mew, I was told by a good buddy TNT, is that you want to sort of just pretend this Pokemon doesn't exist while you're drafting. Reason being is because you don't want it to be, you know, locked into any sort of role. So if you don't have any of these Stealth Rockers, be like, oh, I have a Mew. You don't want to be using, like, while using a Stealth Rocker, you don't want Mew to be using Stealth Rocks every week, because you can do a lot of other stuff as well. You don't want to, it's a bit of a waste of value if you just make him use Stealth Rocks every week. So you can use Stealth Rocks pretty well, but I don't want to do it every week. Because I have other Stealth Rockers, for example. And I have more Defoggers. My Defogging game isn't amazing. They've got a fair few Defoggers, a lot of them would rather use other things. But I have a couple, like, decent hazard removal options. But yeah, is there anything else to say about Mew? It learns Transform. I can turn into the opponent. That's pretty cool. Don't know if I'm going to use that, but it's interesting. And, you know, Synchronize is cool, I guess, to bounce status conditions back. However, that's not going to be too much of an issue because, well, Mew's main weakness is, besides, you know, Dark types, and, you know, Ghost and Bug as well, I guess, is status conditions. So if a Mew's setting up, or if a Mew's just being bulky, if this thing gets a Toxic thrown at it, yeah, it can bounce it back as well, but it will still be poisoned. So if it gets poisoned or something, it just completely weakens this Pokemon because it's now put on a timer, or, you know, Paralysis slows it down if I'm doing a swooping set. This thing doesn't like status, so on my will pick, I can pick two Pokemon. I've got Mew and something that, the Pokemon that is a built counter to status conditions. The Pokemon that summons a terrain that makes everything immune to status conditions. Who is it? Well, you probably guessed, Feeny, otherwise known as the quirky bivalve. Yeah, so Misty Surge sets up terrain. Anything that's touching the ground does not care about status conditions. They can't be statused while this thing is active. It can still be hit by Toxic Spikes on the switch-in before Misty Terrain's active, so that's something you need to watch out for. But yeah, so Tapu Fini kills two birds with one stone. It is a really good Dark check because it is very bulky, and, you know, it's a Fairy type, so it resists Dark. And also it removes, it blocks status conditions from Mew in case Mew has to set up or whatnot. It's a pretty good combo. And in return, well, Mew doesn't really offer too much for Feeny in return, really. It gets hazards and pivoting, so you can pivot into this thing. And Tapu Fini can be very scary in different ways. Similar to Mew, it's a bit of a Swiss Army knife of what it can do. Like, Tapu Fini is a pretty potent Scarfer because it has, like, decent special attack. It is good attacking stabs, a decent move pool, and it has access to Trick, so it can trick away the Choice Scarf and lock something into a move that doesn't want it. Or it can go for like a Carmine set and start boosting. It's very hard to kill, especially when it can't be statused, which is really nice. Or it can just, you know, be a bulky set. It has access to Taunt, Knockoff, and Defog even. Although Defog does remove terrain, so it's something to look out for, but, you know, it's alright. Main issue with Feeny is that it doesn't have good recovery. It has leftovers, and it has rest. And rest it can't use because it can't sleep in its terrain. So if I want to do rest, I can use Telepathy, which is basically a ability that has no effect in singles. But it allows me the rest, so I could use rest if I really wanted to. But I do have 2 Wish Passes in my team later on. They're low tier ones because all the good ones are gone. But they're not too bad nonetheless. But yeah, what else is to say about Feeny? Doesn't really like Steel types a lot, especially stuff like Ferroform, because it doesn't really have any coverage options to really deal with Steel types too well. And, you know, obviously it doesn't like Grass and Electric, Poison as well too well. So I have a few monsters to deal with that, but I wanted to complement the special attacking prowess of Feeny with a very strong attacker on the physical end, and one that has a good speed tier. Also, it's another Pokemon that can deal with Dark types from Mew because this team is built and also not built around Mew. And yeah, so it's a fighting type, decently fast. It's there to offensively deal with Dark types, where Feeny does it defensively, it is Tarakion. Before I get onto this, just want to mention that I did use Feeny back in my first season of Eternal City, which was called SPDL back in the day of a few seasons ago, when I was in the bottom division, and Feeny was very, very good, so hopefully it does the same here. But yeah, anyway, onto Tarakion, also known as the Mad Cow. This thing is a offensive monster. Yeah, so 129 attack is pretty good. It's not like insane. However, rock fighting stabs are so hard to wall together. Like, there is very few Pokemon that can take on both those stabs at once. Which makes this thing very potent because it gets access to Swords Dance. In one Swords Dance, everything's being blown away, especially with a good 108 speed tier, which is pretty nice. And yeah, because of how offensively scary it is, it also has access to Stealth Rocks, which means I can scare Pokemon out pretty easily because Tarakion is, well, you know, it's a pretty scary offensive mon. So it allows me to get Stealth Rock up on the offensive end pretty easily, depending on the matchup, of course. And obviously, it resists fighting. It has pretty decent bulk for an offensive Pokemon, which isn't, don't know if the music on has talk. Okay, there's some sort of the music I have on has some sort of meowing or talking in it, and it's really distracting me. I thought it was someone outside, which was interesting considering it's late at night. So you know, it's not the best time to be hearing people outside. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. Yeah, so Tarakion can be a pretty potent Scarfer because it's pretty strong by default. It's pretty fast, so you can outspeed things and revenge kill pretty well. Yeah, it's not like the most insane thing in terms of versatility. It has pretty alright coverage. That doesn't like a lot of physical walls, because some things like, you know, Hippowdon, for example, it resists rock and it can also take on fighting that isn't choice banded reasonably well considering how bulky it is. So this mon doesn't really have a lot to deal with some physically defensive walls, but yeah, overall it's not the most like versatile thing. Like, it's either going to run like, you know, band, setup, scarf for the most part, but like, it doesn't need anything crazy. It's Tarakion. This thing is very strong, and yeah. So moving on to the next Pokemon, I wanted to get a Pivoter, a fast one, because, you know, I want to be able to like allow Mew and Tarakion to get in and destroy things. So I need things to facilitate that. So my pivoting game isn't amazing. I've got a couple pivoters that are alright. Most of them are kind of offensive and weak to Stealth Rocks, so my defogging game is it's a bit of an issue, defogging and pivoting, but it can be patched up reasonably well if I do it right, depending on the Pokemon. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. This Pokemon is one of the hardest hitting U-turners in the game, and one of the fastest in the game. It might be the fastest in the game. Actually, no, Ninjask exists. So no. But this Pokemon is Mega Beedrill, also known as Insectophobia, because this thing would give me Insectophobia if I saw it in real life, because this thing is horrifying. But yeah, here's my Mega slot. There was not really any Megas on the board that really fit what I wanted to do this season, and I wasn't really too interested in too many. There was a couple I was sort of interested in. Then I had a friend of mine, TNT, recommend the Bee. And I had a look. I've never really considered Bee in many things before, because, for one, it's super frail. This thing is the definition of a glass cannon. It has no defense. It's no defensive utility whatsoever. And also, I'm not a fan of like Pokemon that are weak to rocks that can't hold boots. I'm so attached to boots after Generation 8. It's insane. Yeah, it's a bug type weak to rocks. However, you know, it's not taking any hits anyway, so the chip isn't too bad. But yeah, so Beedrill, 150 attack stat. Wow, it's not bad. It's pretty good. It's really good. But you know, since it can't hold an item, it can't be amplified like Tarakion's can. So it's sort of just locked at 150, but it's just decent all round. Unfortunately, Bug Poison is not the best offensive typing. But it'll work. It'll make it work because I think this thing has the strongest U-turn in the game, because for one, it gets Bug Stab, you know, 50% boost. or 1.5 times. And it also has ability adaptability, which increases the 1.5 times boost of moves of the same type as you, stab, to 2 times. So, what is it? So U-turn goes from 70 base power to 140 power, which is not bad, with 150 attack stat. It's pretty strong for, you know, a move 70 base power normally. It's usually used on defensive mons. But yeah, it's very strong. So you can sort of just 2-hit a lot of Pokemon that aren't particularly bulky, which is good, on a pivoting move. So yeah, this thing can sort of scare out Pokemon to get U-turns, or just do big damaging U-turns, and then go into, like, you know, Tarakion, Feeny, whatever. Also can deal with poison types. Not poison types. It's a poison type that can deal with fairy types that Tarakion doesn't really like. So this thing can scare out a lot of fairy types pretty easily. And also has the coverage to deal with other Pokemon that can switch into it. So having a fast knockoff is really useful. Especially, you know, it's like a Dragapult or something, for example. Gives it coverage for ghosts and all that. You know, Poison Jab's pretty decent. Also has a good poison chance, but status isn't too important on this team because, you know, Feeny's going to disable it anyway. You know, also gets Drill Run, so coverage for bug, not coverage for bug, coverage for fire and steel types, which is pretty nice. Yeah, Beedrill also gets access to Toxic Spikes, which is worth noting. Similar effect to Tarakion, where it can scare out the opponent and get a T-Spike up, but it doesn't do it as well because if the opponent does stay in, Beedrill will die because it's a, you know, it's a little wasp bee thing that's gonna that will die to a pebble. There's no defense. And also gets Defog, but I don't think I'm ever going to use Defog on this thing. There's no bulk at all. So this thing's just going to be hitting hard, going fast. That's Beedrill for you. Moving on, we have Bronzong. Second Psychic type, but it's fine, because Psychic complements still pretty well. Also, this is the Magic Bell. Couldn't really think of too creative of a name for it. You know, it's the most creative design anyway. It's a bell. What can I say? But yeah, Bronzong, bulky steel type, you know, every team needs one. Steel is so good defensively. And a bulky one at that, like 67 HP is serviceable, but 116 defenses is really nice. So this thing's pretty bulky. The rest of its stats are meh, but it's the typing and defenses that sell this Pokemon for me. It's also like a nice bulky rocker, and it has access to like body press, so a move that's based on the fence, and also has a way of boosting the fence with iron defense, so it can do little setup type things. Also gets like okay coverage, gets access to like Earthquake. Not really much coverage, to be honest. It gets Earthquake. It's sort of just a wall. Like, it's not the most like in-depth wall, but it's a nice wall. And also it's a steel type that's immune to ground, which puts it in a very nice place because it gives it a lot of it checks a lot of powerful things. For example, you know, Garchomp or something. I don't know. Immune to ground, resist dragon. It just has to deal with fire moves, which is, you know, it's not too bad. Like a lot of ground types, their coverage doesn't do too well against steel types. So Levitate is really nice here. Also gets heat proof, so I can turn the tables and fire types if I think they can prey on me. It removes my fire weakness. So then I can just, you know, pretend it doesn't even exist. Which is pretty fun. So it's nice messing between heat proof and levitate. The opponent doesn't really ever know what I'm going to do in terms of the immunities, and with the immunity of ground for levitate or the resistance of fire, not really resistance but just neutrality to fire of heat proof. But yeah, the bell isn't like that crazy. Doubling up on Psychic's fine, because Psychic's just a nice type in draft. And it doesn't really share the same role as Mew. Like, Bronzong's kind of just like the bulky stealth rocker. Mew can be a bulky stealth rocker if it wants, but Bronzong sort of just takes the pressure off and does it itself, while also being a nice steel type, and a ground type check, which is alright. This is what's left of my original team. Most of the team I initially drafted, I traded away because I just wasn't happy with what I had. I originally like a Volcarona, but that thing just cost too much for what I needed, and you know, it's kind of a bit one-dimensional. It's one-dimensional for my liking. So I think the next Pokemon is well, it's not that one, but it's Thunderous T. Not a fire type. We'll get to that later. So yeah, I wanted, so I noticed my team was getting a little bit physical. So I wanted a really strong special wall breaker. And, you know, Thunderous T delivers. 145 special attack stat is really good. Especially with 101 speed here. Like, 101 is so magical because so many Pokemon sit at 100 base speed and below. And just being 1 point ahead of that, like, makes all the difference to Thunderous. It's so nice because you can just outspeed a lot of Pokemon around that area. I would have probably preferred Thunderous Eye, because I like the increased speed here and the ability to be more physical. And, yeah, but it does cost an extra point, and someone sniped it before I could get it. Before I wanted to get it, really, so Thunderous T works. And it's also stronger, especially in this special category. So yeah, this mon hits really hard, and it has good coverage for an electric type. Access to Grass Knot, like Sludge Bomb, I think it's Superpower. I think it gets Extra Sensory, maybe. But yeah, it gets some decent utility moves. It gets access to like U-Turn, Knockoff. I think it gets Taunt. It can be a more bulky set if I want, because Electric Flying is really nice defensively. And Volt Absorb also gives me immunity to Electric, which is really nice. I have a Ground type that is immune to Electric type anyway, but having another like offensive immunity is really nice. But yeah, Thunderous is just nice. It's very high power, has good coverage, although, Landorus it's not too great against, but there's ways around that, and, it doesn't have to be locked into Volt Switch, because it can use U-Turn if ground types are an issue, and also it gets access to Nasty Plot. One Nasty Plot in, this thing's doubling special attack, and nothing switching into it besides, like, a ground type, or maybe an electric type. Shame that Thunderous doesn't really get any flying coverage, because flying would be so nice against, like, grass types and just anything really. Flying's is pretty nice defensively. But alas, Thunderous T does not get special flying coverage. Or physical, for that matter, really. Which is unfortunate, but it's fine. We'll just pretend the flying's just there for a ground immunity. And a weakness to rocks, which I don't really want, but, it's fine. But yeah, Thunderous T, nice special attacker that complements Tarakion pretty well. Deals with all the bulky water Tarakion doesn't like. Yeah, Tarakion also deals with steel types that Thunderous sometimes will struggle against. So they're pretty good together. Moving on, we have Flareon. Also known, if we go back to Thunderous T, just a cheeky little Metallica reference. So yeah, we have Flareon, Hot Fuzz. See what I did there? Anyhow, Flareon is my Fire type replacement Volcarona. This thing is a value pick. 3 points for Flareon. Now, there's a lot of people thinking like, oh, Flareon's garbage, oh. And yes, it is garbage in some formats. However, it has a lot of decent value as a 3-point fire type in draft. And reason being, it gets access to Wish, which is a pretty coveted move. And basically, it's a fire type with recovery, which isn't the most common thing in the world. And 60 defenses isn't amazing, but 65, 110 special defense is pretty alright. So it can use Wish to pass the teammates. It also type-wise it matches up really well with Bronzong and Feeny. Also gets access to Baton Pass, so it's not really the most useful pivoting move, but it's like a slow pivoting option that I can use to bounce around if need be. Also get a fire immunity because of Flash Fire, which is pretty nice. So I can, deal with a lot of strong fire types that I would otherwise probably struggle to resist with this thing. So yeah, convenience of that. Or I can do a gut set, which I probably won't do because this requires me to poison myself, which Feeny doesn't really allow. But if I do manage to do that, my 130 attack stat, which is really good, gets boosted by 50%, which is really good. However, Flareon's coverage gets kind of crap. So yeah, Flareon's probably not going to be offensive too much. It'll probably be relegated to more defensive options. It also gets Heal Bell. That's pretty good. It can heal status for Pokemon that are not immune to that are in the air. Stuff in the air doesn't care about terrains. Yeah, also worth noting, Flareon got Scorching Sands this generation, which gives it ground coverage against rock types, which is pretty good. Also opposing fire types, I suppose. So yeah, Flareon's like a nice value pick, I reckon. 3 points offers a fair bit. Probably come a fair few weeks. Just wish his defenses were a bit better, but you know, it's what can you do? Anyway, moving on. We have our little dude, the Gligar. So originally I had a similar ground type in this role. I had a Flygon. You know, like a ground immune ground type. But Flygon's defensive utility is kinda not great, and I didn't want a dragon type that didn't resist water. So here I am with Gligar, and you may be looking at Gligar stats, being like, "Oh, it's pretty garbage for your ground type." But you know, Eviolite exists because this is a first stage Pokemon. So that 105 defense stat, which is, you know, pretty good, gets boosted up by 50%. So does special defense stat. So this thing gets pretty good defenses when it has Eviolite. Only issue is it makes it a bit vulnerable to knockoff, which, you know, is not great. So it's probably always gonna be using Eviolite because it needs the defense boost. But you know, what can you do? So yeah, Gligar's pretty cool because it compresses Stealth Rock and Defog into one slot. So it can either Stealth Rock or Defog, or both if it really wants to, but it's probably not going to. Also worth noting, it doesn't touch the ground, so it doesn't benefit from misty terrain. But I can use immunity, which makes me immune to poison anyway, which is pretty nice. I'm also immune to ground. Well, not ground. Well, I am immune to ground, but I'm immune to Thunder Wave because I'm a ground type. Yeah, Gligar's defensive typing is pretty good. It's immune to ground, immune to electric, similar to Thunderous. So I may eventually change to a more offensive ground type, or just a different ground type, since it kind of overlaps with Thunderous a bit, but Gligar's a bit more defensive of how it works. Also has good utility, has knockoff, has U-turn. This is one of my few sort of like bulky pivots, but it's fine. Yeah. So yeah, it's got good utility. It's a good like defensive utility Pokemon, and it's not my solo electric immunity as well because I have Thunderous in case I need that for whatever reason. But yeah, Gligar's pretty good for 9 points. You know, combines my ground defensive flying, defensive ground type into one slot. Nice roll compression. Yeah. Moving on, we have a crazy pick here. Guzzlord, also known as Bruce. I'll be referring to him as Bruce from now on. So yeah, Bruce is one of the weirdest stat spreads in the game. It has one of the highest HP stats ever, 223. That's insane. But it's brought down by its horrible defenses, so 53 and 53. And it kind of balances out to make it into like a relatively bulky Pokemon, if need to be, thanks to the HP stat. Which is cool because it's so high, you don't really need to invest in it with EV, so you're free to boost the defenses. So it can become pretty bulky if need be. And its attacking stats are pretty alright. 101 and 97. Not too bad, not too shabby. And this thing gets so much coverage as well. It gets access to poison coverage, it gets access to fire coverage, steel coverage, ground coverage, I think rock coverage. It can do a fair bit, and it gets access to knockoff, stab and knockoff as well. Pretty good. And yeah, like and it can be either physical or special, so it keeps the opponents on their toes. Provided that you know, Guzzlord's useful in that situation. I'm not going to bring them every time just to confuse the opponent whether or not physical or special. But yeah, and Guzzlord brings a lot defensively to the table. Dark and Dragon is pretty good offensive typing. I deal with the Dark and I can resist Ghost and Dark for my Bronzong and my Mew, which, you know, the Mew is the team's kind of built around. So I can deal with them decently well. Also, you know, resist like fire, electric, grass, and water. Water's the big one. Pretty well. And it can deal with a lot of Pokemon just virtue of its typing, which is pretty good. Doesn't even need to invest into defenses if I don't want to. Only issue is it's really slow, which you know, isn't the greatest quality. 43 speed's pretty bad. But you know, it has good defensive utility. It's a nice bulky attacker, really. That's its sort of purpose. And Beast Boost is cool because I can boost my highest stat, which will usually end up being the offenses because the defenses are so bad. Can probably snowball a little bit, but not going to snowball much because the speed's really bad. But yeah, that's Guzzlord. It's a budget Hydreigon really, without the speed or recovery, or just raw damage. It's just bulkier. I think it's bulkier. Don't quote me on that. It's a diet Hydreigon, basically. Maybe swap that for another Dark type eventually, but for the time being, I like its position here, and it's a pretty nice low tier. Next we have Rosa Raid, also known as Flower Power. This mon here is a drafter's dream. Reason being, you get spikes. Spikes is a really hard to come by move sometimes. And not only that, it gets toxic spikes too. So, you know, double trouble, gets both. 2 hazards, which is pretty nice, and it has pretty good offensive stats, 125, special attack's really good. Wanted another poison type, because Beedrill, looking at Beedrill amongst my type spreads, I'm just going to ignore it because this thing, that's not going to offer me any defensive utility whatsoever. So I needed a bulky poison type, well not bulky, but it can be bulky with 105 special defense. So yeah, so it's a nice fairy check, if need be. Quad resist grass, which is good for some offensive grass types. And also it can punish any like physical attackers with poison point. So if anything wants to make contact with Rosa Raid, provided I live it, because it will still work. Because basically, if it make contact with me, they'll get poisoned. But if I die, you know, we can still work, but I don't want to just die to take a U-turn, you know. Or if not, if I'm already statused, I can use Natural Cure. I switch out, my status is gone. It's a nice status absorber, which is pretty good. Also gets good recovery in Synthesis. And I can even do like a cool set where I can use like Rest, and use Natural Cure to switch out. But that might be the most reliable thing since Misty Terrain will be up a lot of the time. And yeah. Rosa Raid's coverage isn't the greatest. It's kind of walled by steel types very hard. So I have a few ways of dealing with steel types in my team anyway, which is fine. But you know, it's something to keep an eye out for. And also psychic coverage for poison types, which is alright. Yeah, it's a pretty good Pokemon. Don't else to say about it. It gets Stun Spore, which is alright. It's got a nice defensive typing, and a nice utility, and it can do some damage if need be, which is pretty good. It's always something that you appreciate from this sort of Pokemon. But yeah, on to our last Pokemon. We only need like 4 points left, and I wanted another Ghost check because I didn't really want Guzzlord as my only one, because you know Guzzlord's alright, but you know it's not amazing. So I got another low tier Ghost check in Kamala, Drop Bear. Also, I don't know what I was talking about when I was saying Guzzlord. I mean Bruce. I don't know who this Guzzlord character is. Bruce is all I know. But yeah, enough about Bruce. We're going to talk about Kamala, the Drop Bear. So you know, Drop Bears are a pretty cool animal in Australia. You don't see them too often, but you don't want to see them because you know they fall on you, then they're gonna really tear into you. They're a pretty dangerous animal, so keep your distance away from the trees and whatnot. Yeah, in Pokemon, this Drop Bear is a lot more cuddly, which is a good change of heart. I think Drop Bears are scary in real life. Anyway, enough about the inspiration for this Pokemon, into what it can do. So its stats are a bit, you know, average to below average really. 65 HP, yeah, it's not great. You'll notice there's a theme in my team. A lot of my Pokemon are sitting at 65 HP for some reason. It's really weird, but they are. But yeah, 65 HP, 65 to defense. Not great. Special defense stat is, you know, 95. That's alright. The good stat here is 115 attack, which is alright, but it's more than right. It's pretty good. But Kamala's not going to be making much use of it because Kamala is more of a utility Pokemon. Originally I was going to go for Regigigas in this slot, and a part of me still kind of wants Regigigas because it's a much more bulky normal type. However, all that thing really brings is knockoff in terms of utility, because you know slow start makes it pretty much useless for 5 turns outside of a defensive use. Also no recovery. Kamala is in the same point value, and it gets access to Wish, which is pretty nice. So I'm not constantly relying on Flareon for Wish. So Kamala can wish if it needs to do. And also has access to U-turn, so it's a nice like sort of bulky-ish U-turn. A nice slow U-turn, which is always appreciated. Yeah, also gets access to... I don't think it gets knockoff. Yeah, U-turn and wish are the two big ones. I feel like there's something else that Kamala gets, I'm not remembering right now. I think it does get knockoff, actually. Yeah, knockoff, wish, U-turn. Pretty good utility all round for those moves. Also gets access to a nice priority move in Sucker Punch, so that's nice for threatening things that are faster, and its attack that's pretty good. Its coverage is also really good. Access to Play Rough, access to, I think it's Earthquake, I'm not sure. Again, it's late, and I'm not checking Showdown really. Yeah, also gets Wood Hammer, very powerful grasp if I want to use that for whatever reason. And also has a unique ability in Comatose, which makes like Kamala pretend it's like, well not pretend, but it's the game thinks it's sleeping, but without actually sleeping, so while you're asleep you're immune to status conditions because you're already asleep. So this thing can't be burnt, paralyzed, poisoned, whatever. I can also do cool sets where I could use like Sleep Talk without actually being asleep, which is alright, but you know, it's the most useful thing ever because Tapu Fini sets up Misty Surge, doesn't really, yeah, it makes the Comatose not as useful, but this thing can just not take status conditions if need be. That's not the main draw to it. It's a decent, it's a like relatively kind of bulky Ghost Resist. Physical Ghost types I will have problems with because its defense is on the physical side. I'm not great, but you know, it has access to Recovery and Wish, which isn't the best recovery, but you know, Wish plus like a slow U-turn is really nice. For the rest of the team, and yeah, the main thing is the Ghost immunity, Wish support, and you know, U-turn. Not that it's not come to every game, but it's a Pokemon that does have value for its points, which is alright. But yeah, that's the team. It's a pretty different team to what I usually draft. I usually draft like a lot more bulky teams, and while this team is relatively bulky, this team takes a more offensive approach with stuff like Tarakion, Beedrill, Thunderous, Guzzlord, Rosa Raid, and Mew potentially. Mew's gonna be an interesting one because Mew doesn't really have any role it fits into. It sort of just does whatever role it needs, or more, really. But a lot of cool mons. And yeah, so in terms of like stuff that I would like to get to potentially trade, Gligar maybe for another ground type, and you know, potentially get a better Dark type than Guzzlord, but combining Dark and Dragon is really nice. But yeah, it's really just the lower to mid tiers aren't amazing, but most of my team I'm pretty happy with. But yeah, the team's got a lot of nice like setup options, nice hazard, really good hazard setting. Hazard control it's alright. Oh, that's right. Kamala gets Rapid Spin. That's the other move it gets. So a nice hazard removal option that isn't blocked by Taunt and doesn't remove my own hazards in case I want a hazard stack, which is pretty nice. But yeah, hazard control isn't like amazing. I have a lot of hazard removal, but they don't really want to be using it. Like Thunderous gets it, and Beedrill gets it, and Feeny gets it. They don't want to be using it all the time because they're rather using other stuff. Feeny less so, but especially Beedrill and Thunderous. But you know, Feeny, let's just say like Feeny, Gligar, Kamala, all pretty decent for their defogging abilities. And yeah, got nice defensive value around, good offensive value. I feel like it's a decently balanced team, and I'm happy with it. It's got it ticked a lot of the boxes for decent drafts, I think. But yeah, we're in a new division now, in the highest division. Good old Aegislash. And hopefully we can do well now that we're here. Hopefully we have another undefeated season again, but I have a bit of wishful thinking having done that twice in a row, really. Thank you for watching this video. I don't know how long this video is. I don't know if it's any good either because I'm tired and it's late and I should promptly go to sleep after this. But yeah, that's the team. Let me know what you think of it. If it's a good team, garbage team, funny team. What do you think of Bruce? All that sort of jazz. And yeah, so I'm gonna stop extending this conclusion and see you later.